Hello and welcome to Turning Point Tactics, the competitive Killteam 40k podcast, focused on giving you the strategies and tactics to seize initiative every turning point. I'm your host Ryan, and I'm joined by the balanced Dataslate to my perfectly planned YouTube script on victory points, Connor. How you doing this evening, Connor?
I'm good, thanks, Ryan. It was good timing, wasn't it? It was just literally as we released it.
It was like they waited for us to hit record, and then as soon as we'd finished editing, decided, yes, now is the time to make all of what you just said redundant. Well, not all of it, but a big portion of it. So
I've got an interesting point now, actually, following on from what we spoke about yesterday, because I quite liked your point about playing victory points aggressively or methodical, so going 2x2, 3-3, or 4x4x4. But that was obviously centered around 12 victory points. Now that we can get 16 points, are we now ready to finally admit aggressive is the way? You should be going 4x4x4x4 if you want to come out top. That's the only way to get full points in 4 turns.
So if you want to max, that is correct. That is the only way. But well, for the benefit of the audience, in case someone listening hasn't necessarily heard of this change, do you want to go ahead and tell them what the change is to primary VP?
Yes. So if you want to get all the details yourself, if you go into Warhammer Community, you can get the Dataslate, and there's also a really nice video between Elliot and Ben on Warhammer TV. We'll probably put the link in somewhere so you can see that. But essentially, the primary points has now got a new ceiling. So it used to be 12. It's now, I'm correct in thinking it's 16 now, isn't it?
Correct, yeah. It's going to work to 16 instead of 12.
And so that then pushes it past that 20 point ceiling to now 24. So you could get 24 points now.
Which was a stealth release, so they re-updated the balanced data set, because initially they hadn't put that second line in, but they just added that little caveat at the end. So each player cannot score more than 16 victory points in total from the mission objective during the battle instead of 12, and a maximum of 24 victory points from the game instead of 20. So that's going to just bump up all those scores that you can do to give us a much, much higher threshold. You're right, Connor. Before, I was talking all about how do you score 12 VP, and that's how all the game plans I talked about were predicated on. And you're right, now that's not necessarily valid. However, and I will caveat this, I don't think that the best game plan going out the door is going to be going for 16 VP every game. I think that is a way to maybe burn yourself out of models and resources early on and potentially get punished by a slightly more cautious opponent going into the game. So I think this is really interesting, and it's a really big change. And I think it's going to force people to be a bit more aggressive, and you're going to see a lot more people trying to get those points leads in turn one, which will make for a much more dynamic game potentially, which is quite cool. But I think all of what we said on the last episode, there is still loads of stuff that remains true in that. And I think now actually the new way of looking at your game plan is how do you score 13 VP? And the reason why I'm saying 13 is it's not like both players can score 16 VP. That's not how the game works. So in 2 of the 3 missions, there is 24 VP on the table, right? So that's how much there is, and that's a finite number, and you can only get a maximum of 24 split between the 2 players.
Except for loot, right? Because loot's still only got an 18 point.
Correct, yeah. So it's either 24 or 18 for loot, which loot obviously being the slightly lower scoring one, which brings them to a point like, why don't they just make loot 4 VP per objective? It would make everything a lot more aligned. But question for GW, I think that's probably the way it should go in future, is just to make loot into a 4-round game where you can only loot every once a turn on all the points, but at the end of the day, it's still worth a maximum of 24. But anyway, by the by, loot is 18, and the rest of the missions are 24. So the game plan that I think that's important to come out of this is how do you get 13 VP minimum? Minimum is the key point. So how do you get minimum 13 VP? Because if you can do that, it's and you max your attack ops, then it becomes irrelevant as to what your opponent does. You're guaranteed to get a win. So I think don't rush ahead too much and try and get 16 straight out the bat, because I still think a lot of tiebreakers are going to be focused on those tac ops, and you might be able to get it, but you're probably steamrolling your opponent anyway. And what I'd be cautious of is overcommitting turn one to try and get that 4 VP, and then finding out that you've burned out of resources by the end of turn 3, because there were teams that were doing that before, right? Like there were teams that were going out there going on that 4-4-4 game plan, and they didn't care that on the last turn they had nothing left, right? Because they had achieved 4-4-4, they'd maxed, they got their attack ops, they went home happy. And now actually the counter to this is where everyone previously thought that it was going to be the most important thing to come out the door aggressive and go for a 4-4-4. I actually think it might be the opposite advice. You've got to be careful of an opponent doing a late game surge. So you might go 4 up on turn 1, and your opponent then gets 2-4-4-4, and you're screwed, or even 2-3-4-4 or something like that. So just be really careful on being too aggressive. Although I know I'm saying that to you, Conor, it's completely irrelevant. but there we go.
No, I genuinely think you got something valid there, but I do want to pick your brains. So you said, I think something quite intelligent there. You said, let's opt for trying to go for 13, and that's how you secure your victory against your opponent. But victory against your opponent isn't good enough, because the whole reason this was introduced was to stop people drawing in tournaments. If you want to win the tournament, is 13 points at every single game going to be enough? Do you need to be looking at 14?
So, well, the change was brought in so that we were drawing during that game. So that's the main thing, because what was happening was a lot of people were scoring 12 VP on primaries and their 6 VP on their attack ops, and it might be quite an uninteractive game, but yet they're drawing and they're pushing through to the next round without having a definitive winner. So this is specifically focused at trying to remove that drawing element within the game itself. But you're absolutely right. Now, I don't know what tournament people are going to be going to and what the win condition is going to be of that tournament, right? So you need to get into this. If you're going for that first place, you need to know what that win condition is, right? So if the win condition is going to be max VP scored, well then you know what, you maybe do need to get out the door and be a bit aggressive and get those VPs. But if the first tiebreaker, the win condition, is going to be tac ops, well then I'll say, hold on, cowboy, don't go fucking mental with it, and maybe instead just get 13 points. And make sure you max on those tac ops. That's be what my advice would be there. So, and there's a few bits that's going to come out of this, which is a little bit more. And I kind of want to I'll touch on it now because it says it's doing it in a later episode. But I do think that and I hate to say that you have a point, but Conor might be right. On the going up early, because it lets you have a bit more control of the battle, right? So, I'm not saying overcommit, I'm not saying throw away everything, but what I am saying is if you can go up on turn 1 and you can get your 4 VP, and you can maybe get, like, say, 4 VP on turn 2, then the best your opponent can ever do is draw with you, right? Because, well, assuming you get 2 VP in turn 3 and turn 4. But it helps you gauge how you need to control the battle, right? So maybe by going up on turn 1, you realise, actually this is getting a little bit hectic. I'm going to go more for a 4-3-3-3 plan, which is going to get me that 13 VP. It's going to put me 1 up on primaries, and it's going to mean that at the end of the game, I'm going to, have that point differential lead. But it lets you gauge it, right? Whereas let's say you're on you only scored 2 points on turn 1. Well, now you're always on a little bit of catch-up, and it might not be the best scenario for you to try and push onto that objective, but you have to do it because the points are there. So there's definitely a benefit to taking that lead early and forcing your opponent to react to you. But my advice still stands on don't be too hesitant just to jump in there and try and max it. So a bit of a change from what we said last week, and I appreciate that's the case, but the key lessons are still there. Any other thoughts on that, Conor, you want to throw in?
No, I just want to reiterate. I think Corn's got you in your grasp. You're corrupted now. You'll slowly change you.
Well, and we'll come to talk about Legionary in a bit, but because there might be more reasons why Corn's winning now. All right. So what other changes have we got, Conor? There's quite a few to talk about.
Yeah. So we spoke about the critical missions pack there, but obviously there were some kill teams themselves that got changed. Let's jump in first with commandos. So they've now had a change to their operatives. So you can now, basically, if you pick the grot, you can get the squig. If you pick the squig, you can get the grot for free, and it's not obligatory, so you don't have to take it. But they're now half an operative, so there's more men for the commandos.
Yeah, so just to make that clear, in the operative selection step of the match mission sequence, if you select a bomb squid operative, you can also select a commando grot operative for free, or vice versa for 11 operatives in total instead of 10. So that's kind of the change that we're looking at, and this is a nice internal balance change, because a lot of people in the new match play games were traditionally just opting for a standard commando, because the commando grot isn't particularly exciting when it comes to any sort of offensive capability, where commandos are already struggling a little bit, and the bomb squig was quite dangerous with the fact that it could explode, do damage to your own people, and was sort of like one of those difficult models, because it always has to stay on engage. So the benefits of this is it's going to give you a bit more activation advantage. It's going to put you up to 11 activations, which is quite nice against those other mid-range teams where before maybe you'd be down to initiative and that sort of stuff, but actually now you can take initiative and still be ending on the same amount of activations, or be one activation up, which could be nice as well. Now, I think there's definitely something to be said here about the bomb squig and how you use it. So if your maps are like Octarius, you can put them behind a door or something visibility blocking, and then run them out. And you can also use that on ITD. And they're quite a useful deterrent in that bomb squid, because it is actually quite a big threat when it comes to detonating. So I think it's a good way of holding people back. So I think we're going to see more people taking this, and he is a fun model, which is good, because it's a bit of a shame to see such a charismatic fun model not being put on the table. I would also say though, don't underestimate the grot and the super conceal and the movement, because a lot of the new missions, and you have to sort of like get into the maps you're playing with and look at them and understand them. But a lot of them, all the objectives can be quite far away, and some of them are about like a 10-inch like move to be able to get there, which is difficult for a lot of teams to do. But a grot can get there on turn one, and even potentially, if your opponent misplays and only puts, say, 2 APL on their baseline objective and they're playing capture, you could potentially throw your grot across the board and force them to only score one, say, on turn one by denying them their home objective, which can be really painful for a team. So definitely something to think about, that there's a lot of plays there. And if you're on a map like Octarius or Nakman with a lot of light cover in the open, this could be a really good model just to hold objectives safely. And you can do that movement early on, and it gives you a lot more flex with the models that you care about, your actual threats, later on in the turn. So something to think about. Commanders are already really good at getting those early VP leads and playing quite aggressively and stacking up those points nice and early. And I think this is going to probably help them do that. Any thoughts on that, Connor?
It's just a nice subtle change, and it'd be good to get that meat-seeking missile out on the board more often. I think he is a cool model, bit dynamic. You don't know what's going to happen, so yeah, nice change.
And at the end of the day, definitely someone will die, which is cool.
Yeah. All right, should we jump on to the next one?
Yeah, let's do it.
So next up, Legionary. Well, specifically Nurgle Legionary. So we've had a change to the mutagenic flesh strategy, where now, so beforehand they could reduce damage to a minimum of 2 damage. Now the damage reduction has gone to a minimum of 3, which is pretty significant for them, I think.
Yeah, this is rough, right? Like,
yeah,
guaranteed get damage reduction is just so nice, right? Because as a competitive player, I like it. Because I know exactly sort of what's going to happen. I'm not trying to figure it out on the fly. And for your opponent, it's kind of nice as well, because again, it's that guaranteed effect. I know how this is going to work out, and this is what's going to happen. But it's so strong, like, it's so powerful that it really shut down those 3 damage weapons. And now, actually, it's going to only shut down sort of like your 4 damage and up weapons, which is a pretty significant change. And one of the key strengths that like Nurgle Legionary had was the fact they had the damage reduction, and they paired that with the ability to ignore injury, and they paired that with the ability to retain crits off of a successful normal save as well. So the fact they could do all of those things just skyrocketed their durability. But now that's gone away. And I think the matches where they're going to most feel this is like any of those bolter matches, right? So against Intercession and Phobos, or even say Thousand Suns, with their rubrics, they're really going to feel quite a lot of extra damage coming through. Whereas before, it would take 6 regular hits to kill a guy. Now suddenly you're looking down at like 4 hits to kill a guy. That actually is quite a significant change. but there's lots of other winners as well. Like Gellerpox matchup is going to be better for Gellerpox, and because a lot they have some melee options which are 3-4 and that sort of thing, which is going to hurt people. And then generically, I think people are more likely to turn away from Nurgle, which I don't actually know if it's going to be like the final nail in the coffin for Nurgle. I still feel that their other abilities are just so good for durability buffs. Where, yeah,
the Overwatch ability and not being injured, they're all pretty cool.
Absolutely, and like particularly in things like Into the Dark, your ability to ignore Overwatch penalties and injure penalties, so you can be injured overwatching on threes. Oof, like that is a huge buff. And these other like models they're not going to get it. But I think what you might see instead is more sort of Tzench and more Undivided come out as a result, because I feel like they're going to be like the natural response to seeing this nerf. So I think this is a good change for the internal faction balance. So I think we're going to see a lot more people try new things in amongst Legionary. But I think overall this is a pretty significant nerf to Legionary. So that there will be more balance internally, but that balance is going to be at a lower tier than they previously sat. And I think this is going to really hurt them into the matchup into session, because those shoot twice, double tapping P1 lethal 5 bolters, I think are going to start ripping through some of these guys pretty quickly.
Not just that, I'm trying to think what's the profile of the chainsword? That was 3, wasn't it?
No, it was 4-5 chainsword.
Was it 4-5?
So that's against a chainsword, it's no difference, unless of course they start taking things like Tzench, and then suddenly, or Tzench, sorry, then absolutely that's going to make a huge change. So I think if we start seeing people shifting away from the traditional sort of Nurgle route, they're going to start getting hurt by those 4 damage weapons that they weren't previously noticing, which will be really interesting to see as well, because it's going to a 3 hit in damage range against those chainswords. You're going to feel that for sure, I think.
I'm all for it. I think it stops the game getting stale. I think a lot of people, when they painted their Legionary, they probably painted them Black Legion, so they can quite happily say these models are all Tzeentch. So it's not hard for anyone. They don't have to repaint anything, probably. I think it's cool.
Yeah. And I've seen some people do like entirely bespoke teams where each model is their own mark, and it looks incredible. So, but you're right. It's good for the internal balance. Absolutely.
Okay, so moving on then. Corsairs have had a very minor change. Essentially, the Shredder has now also gained the rending critical hit. Why? It just brings it in line with Hand of the Archon, I think, just aligning these factions with each other. That makes sense.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm going to just put it out there to the Corsair players and everyone else playing against Corsairs. Like, this isn't a buff. I mean, it feels like one, but it's really just a nice to have. All right, so it's only going to affect one model, and it only ever works on a crit. And sure, the weapon has 5 attacks, but you cannot be relying on this at all. So the difference between the Shredder on Corsairs and the Shredder on Jakari is massive, right? Because the Jakari have many ways of being able to get crits across their team, so they're going to get those crits, and then it's going to be able to proc this rending, which is really nice. However, Corsairs do not live in that same park at all. So once again, their reliability being tied to rolling a 6 is just rough. So cool. It's nice to have. Good to see, but I don't see this changing anything too much.
Yep, fair enough. But Phobos, though, they have had a big change. So they have gained the following strategic ploy. Vanguard strategic ploy. It can perform a mission action or the pickup action for 1 less action point to a minimum of 0. So now they can start chopping into conceal or opening doors and just being more dynamic, I think.
Yeah, so not on the reconcealing is a individual action, it's not a mission action. So they wouldn't be able to do that. But what they could do is move and loot a point, shoot, and then conceal themselves, which is what they weren't able to do before.
But apologies. Their action economy has increased. That's a better way of phrasing it, sorry.
Yeah, that's a much better way of saying it. So, but you're right. So, that's really cool. And Vanguard is already giving you that +1 inch to movement. It's already giving you the ability to ignore the first transverse penalty or climb, whatever. So, the first 2 inches. But so, okay, nice. That's a good buff. However, let's look at this team. The most CP hungry team there is. So you want to be doing your Bolter Discipline, you want to be doing your P1, you want to be doing your Vanguard. Like that's 3 CP a turn. Oof. Like okay, you have a way to be able to regenerate CP, but that's from your leader spending APL, etc., etc. So it's got a lot more expensive. So you want to be almost doing this every turn, especially if you're playing into the dark. And now you're going to be wanting to find as much CP as you can to be able to do that. Cool. I love it. It's really good. It's a nice ploy. Noting that 2/3 of all the missions at the moment are action based. This is pretty good. It pairs nicely with Terror because you can just jump on one of their objectives, make them -1 APL and loot it in front of them for free, whilst also double tapping in the face with the bolt pistol. Really nice. Love it. That's great. However, this is not the biggest buff to Phobos. We've actually already covered the biggest buff to Phobos, and that buff was Legionary getting hit with the Mutilate Flesh strategic ploy, right? So that is the biggest buff to Phobos that there is out there, because that matchup was so rough. So rough. Like, only being able to do 2 damage, with like no rerolls and reliability and getting damage across. Oof, not fun at all. That was gross. So the fact that Legionary had been checked back into line is really useful. So that's good. However, it is a shame that Phobos don't exist in a vacuum, and they do have a bigger older brother called Intercession Squad, because I feel like Intercession Squad's going to be a bit of a bully to this team, who can sort of hold their hand behind their back and hit them with their own fist and say stop punching yourself, because the Intercession effectively has the same stuff, right? So they can effectively go out the door with a P1 bolter with lethal 5 and balanced. And Phobos have to spend CP to do all those things and shoot twice. So, rapid methodical intercession is more durable than these guys. They're almost the same speed, and they're going to be able to do a lot more damage. So, yeah, it could be pretty rough for Phobos going into that matchup, and I think you're going to see quite a few Intercession coming out of it. But we'll talk more about Intercession in a bit. So. Cool. I would still love to see some rerolls on Phobos, but this is a nice change. It's going to make their action efficiency better, which is fine. But I don't think that's why they were losing. Like, I think they were scoring points okay. I think they were losing on their reliability and killing. Was my take on Phobos. But I think we will see a significant rise in win rates based on this, and based on the fact that their worst matchup, I would say, has been significantly reduced, which is a positive.
You made an interesting point there. I just want to think about a little bit more. So you said the Sergeant generates a free CP, which is valid, but it costs him an APL. But then if he's spending it on this Vanguard ability, everyone's getting bonus APL essentially. So is it a net win? I know it doesn't sound like it, like it's costing you, and they are a CP hungry team, but for 1 APL, you've given the whole team plus 1 APL.
Yeah, but however, so it's not quite plus 1 APL, and that's kind of the thing I'd say about it is it's free mission actions and it's free pickup. So pickup is largely irrelevant. I mean, sure, you can now run over and you can grab your recover item turn 1, but that was pretty much free VP anyway, so I wouldn't get too excited about that. But it's going to help on the primary objective, doing a bit more shooting and playing the mission at the same time. I guess where this is arguably giving you a bit more reliability and a bit more offensive output is now that you can move, do the objective, and still shoot twice, yeah. which is nice. So that's where it's going to give you a bit more of an oomph where you need it. But your leader now, who's probably one of your most killing models outside of the marksman, is now having to spend that action every turn to be able to do it. So
yeah.
I almost feel like there's a bit of a strategy here where if you see your Phobos opponent across the table spending a lot of points early on Bolt Discipline and deadly shots and all that sort of stuff, and you go, okay, he spent 3 CP on turn 1 to do all these stuff because he wants to go out the door fighting, I'm just going to hide. I'm just going to score my 2, whatever, let him get 4, and then let him get 4 again, and now he's out of CP. Like, he's spent all his CP. And on turn 3, I'm going to steamroller him. I'm going to use that advantage where you have it, because if they burn out, and which they will burn out very quickly, or if you can kill their leader early on, they're not going to have the CP to do any of this stuff that they want to do. So something to be aware of. CP management for Phobos is going to be really important. And I think if you're a Phobos player, maybe don't pop everything turn one. Like, don't pop Bolt Discipline turn one. Just maybe go for your, Vanguard to get to the objectives you want to get to, and have the movement in the right place. But save your deadly shots and your Bolt Discipline until turn 2 and turn 3, because then you can maybe surge forwards and be really mean with it. That's kind of my thoughts anyway.
Cool. Well, you mentioned the poster boys intercession. Should we discuss their changes?
Sure. Let's jump to intercession.
Yeah, essentially, it's very similar to Nurgle. The durable perk that they had, or Chap's tactic they had, it's now each time Zombie fights in combat or a shooting attack is made against it, in the resolve successful hit step of that combat or shooting attack, one critical hit inflicts one less damage on this operative, again to a minimum of 3. Beforehand, it was all of them. There's all the crits.
Yeah, so two big changes there. One, it's now a minimum of 3, and 2 is that it's only working versus one critical hit. So it's, don't be wrong, it's still good, right? So this is useful into like power weapons and that sort of thing. If you're playing someone that's got power swords and not particularly reliable, maybe they're only getting 1 crit, and you can make it only do 5 damage, and then you can see if you can take the next 8 that comes through from the regulars or whatever. But realistically, I think we're going to see that this drops off, because rapid is really good, methodical is really good, and this was always like it's just about on peer. But in the realm of shooting, you can ignore this, because you can use your transhuman physiology to make a regular save into a crit save. And that sort of thing. So it's a nice internal balance, because I think it still has a place. It's still useful. It's just not quite as useful as it used to be. And there's teams such as your Galapox Infected are going to absolutely love this, because their leader with his Pyre Gut and like Into the Dark and that sort of stuff, he's now going to be on a flat 3/3 damage. It's going to be really gross to be able to deal with, and it's going to force through a lot. Other teams like this is like any team with a flamer, or the Vitiates in particular, they really like this. So there is some perks. And finally, what I'll say is team for shotguns. If you have 3/3 damage, well, that's actually going to be 3/3 now, rather than what it was before, which is 3/2, where you got punished for rolling a crit, which always felt a bit weird. So generically, durable is significantly worse. It's still okay to a point, but I would say it's going to be rare where your opponent is rolling a lot of crits during a shooting attack, where you can maybe just spend 1 CP to knock it down, and focus maybe on being a bit more killy with your methodical.
Yep. Yeah, valid. So you think we're going to see methodical now more than anything else?
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things I'd say as well is it's acknowledging that this balanced data slate in general, I think, is going to be really good for intercession. So now that legionaries are, I think, easier to beat, we're going to see intercession have a significant rise, because that was one of the hardest matchups, I think, was Nurgle Legionary, and actually now you can probably shoot them off the board quite comfortably. So that's pretty cool for them. And I think overall they're going to be in a really good place going forwards, because they're coming out as one of the strongest elite teams, I think, based on what we're seeing happening around them.
So you said Galapox, they sort of got a minor buff with the change to durable, but they've also got a minor nerf here. So Volgar Thrice Cursed, his Lead the Infection ability is now, you can only use it once per battle as opposed to all the time.
Yeah, so this is their ability to just effectively get more CP. So I think generically any way that you can lose CP is a bit of a nerf, but I don't really think this is addressing why the team is winning significantly more than other teams, which is, I think, mainly their durability. I guess you could argue that if you're taking away their ability to spam the rust emanations of that sort of stuff to be able to make their melee more survivable, then I guess this is getting at that. But they still had enough CP to do that anyway. So I think the main reason why this team is so good is their Feel No Pain. But the problem with it is any sort of Feel No Pain roll, if you make it a 6+, it just makes the team pretty much unplayable. As a 5+, it's really swingy, and it's a really bad experience for both players, because if you're on the the receiving end, and you have really hot feel no pain rolls against you, and you just can't get the damage through against this army, then it just feels rough, and vice versa. If you don't make any feel no pain rolls and your guys die really quickly, that can be really rough as well. So I think in general that's probably where the issue with the team is. I would love to just see a flat damage reduction instead, but that's not quite where we're at. But yeah, it will hurt them with their tactical ploys, but I don't think it's going to be a massive nerf to the team. We'll probably see them do quite well. Also noting that some of their harder matchups have been nerfed around them.
I think this one surprised me the most actually, because they received quite a big nerf in the last day of Slate, and this is another little, admittedly subtle nerf. But I've not really been seeing that much Gallipot and I've been playing. Well, you've seen more tournaments than me, but I just don't feel they're being selected as much. So I don't know. I don't. We'll see what this one does. I was just surprised. I don't know if it's good or bad, really. I'm just surprised.
Yeah, there's still quite a small portion of the meta, so it'll be interesting to see how if they grow in popularity and how they get on. But I think there's in Spain in particular, there's quite a few good players running them a lot.
Yeah.
So it's one of those things where it's like, are we just seeing the effect of a very small data set where you have some very good players running this team, or are we seeing something that's actually potentially too strong? So I think GW have done fine here. They've gone for a very minor nerf, so they've done something, but time will tell, I guess, and we'll see as people pick up. Because you're right, they're not too popular in the UK.
I'm a big advocate for these small, subtle changes as opposed to overly harsh ban hammers that then get reworked later on and rescinded. So I think they're doing the right thing at the minute.
Speaking of, should we go into Star Striders? You just got the massive nerf hammer. They've smashed into the ground.
They've had the most changes in this data slate. So let's start off with the support assets. So previously, all support assets had their ballistic skill improved by 1. Now that is only the Architect Beam, the privateer support asset. Should we pause and talk about that for a bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So it'd be interesting to do some stats on this, because I think you might have some data for us, Connor, to be able to give what the actual change is. But I think the overarching point that I'll make is it was kind of a feel bad, or it had that effect. If you got hit by a big blast and lost lots of models, you could be it would feel bad if it was an unexpected angle. I don't actually think this is going to help. So I think with the casual players, if you're getting unexpectedly hit, your opponent can still roll hot, and they can still get those big attacks with lots of damage off anyway. So I think at the competitive end, most players were just sort of denying it with positional most of the time, and I think this is going to maybe help you if you get caught out by something you didn't quite see, making it slightly less reliable. But kind of you got some data on this, surely, right?
Yes. Let's keep this week. It's always hard listening to just raw data, and I'll open with we've compared the impact of this ballistic skill reduction against Horde, mid-range, and elite. What does that mean? Okay, so Horde I'm counting as a 7-win model with a 5-up save. A mid-range is an 8-win model with a 4-up save, and elite is a 12-win model with a 3-up save. And in all cases, I've assumed that the model is in cover. Although against something with barrage, obviously that doesn't make any difference, but that's what we'll assume from here on. So with the guided shell previously, where it was hitting on a 3+, you'd have a 57% chance of killing a Horde model, a 46% chance of killing a mid-range model, and an 9% chance of killing an elite model. Now it's gone to 4+. You're looking at a 39% chance to kill a Horde model, a 30% chance to kill a mid-range, and just a 4% chance to kill an elite. So it's already severely reduced the chance to kill. So injured probably is quite high. I didn't look into that, but the chance to just kill outright, that's been nerfed quite significantly.
Well, do you have the differences between the two? What's the actual percentage difference that we've seen from this nerf?
So against the Horde, that's been reduced by 19% chance to kill. Mid-range, that's been reduced by 17% chance to kill. And elite, that's been reduced by a 4% chance to kill. Maybe it would help actually if we put this data up on the
it'll be on the screen if you would see.
Yeah. What does that actually mean? Well, the damage you're forecasting against the horde. So previously it was 8 damage against a horde. Now it's only going to do 6. Again, that's just injured. Against mid range, you were forecasting 7 damage. Now you're only forecasting, I'm going to say 4.8 because 5 is injured, 4 is not injured. So that's an interesting breakpoint there. And against elite, where you were forecasting 5.5 damage, we're now only looking at 3.7. So Guided Shell looking pretty nerfed there.
Yeah, so that's really affecting them against the horde teams, right? So it doesn't seem to have much of an effect against elites. You're doing a bit less damage, which is nice, but it's really affecting a probability kill on the Guided Shell versus horde teams. But the other asset, the cluster bomb, also got nerfed, Connor, didn't it? So what's the stats reference the cluster bomb?
Correct. So 3+ into horde, that was looking at a 33% chance to kill. Into mid range, 15% chance to kill, and then against elite, just a 0.25% chance to kill. Now at 4+, it's an 18% chance to kill a horde model, 7% chance to kill a mid range model, and a 0.13% chance to kill an elite. So the difference is a 15% drop off for horde, a 8% drop off for mid range, and a 0.12 for elite. What does that mean in terms of damage? So against horde, where you were forecasting 5 damage, you're now forecasting 3.8. Mid range, it was 4.39. Now it's 3. And against elites, 3.5 has gone to 2.3. So, like you said, this is really impacting the horde teams more than the elites.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. So pre-nerf, you're expecting to, with the cluster bomb, you're expecting to wound, right? Was the main thing. Whereas now, actually, you're not even going to get, you're not even going to wound the operative. You're just going to do a bit of chip damage, but they're actually going to walk away from it not wounded. And that's probably a really interesting point to take away. Is I think don't be surprised if the model that you've shot at hasn't actually been injured as a result of these nerfs. So that seems like quite a significant change against their ability into those horde and mid-range teams, to be honest. But there's a few other changes that they've done as well. Kind of what else have they done?
I just wanted to pause there because you're more FA with Star Striders than I am. Am I right in thinking you only get 2 of these assets anyway? We're just going to see that Cluster Bomb doesn't get used and everyone goes Guided Shell and the Laser.
Yeah, so you have to alternate every other turn. So you're right. So I think what you'll probably see is, I mean, the benefit of the cluster bomb is the fact it's a 3-inch blast. So if you could potentially hit a lot of enemies, then doing, say, 3.8 damage on average to all those enemies, but note that it's a standard deviation, so actually you're going to get either 3 or 4 probably. But that means that it's probably going to be favoured. You're probably going to favour the Architect Beam because that's going to be quite a reliable way of removing at least one model, and also then the Guided Shell is also going to be better because it's going to do more of what you want going forwards. Now, this is a bit of a different ballpark when we talk about Into the Dark because it has Lethal 5, but we're not going to get into the stats of that. But yeah, it's definitely going to be significantly less strong versus those teams. But you're right, I think you're going to see most players now just running the beam and the Guided Shell.
So while we've got the data up, I think we'll jump to the rotor cannon. So the rotor cannon, previously it gained Relentless, I think, in the last Dataslate. It's now lost Relentless again. So what's the impact of that? Well, again, we'll look at it into Horde, Mid-Range, and Elite. So with Relentless, it was forecasting a 78% chance to kill a Horde model, 61% chance to kill a mid-range model, and a 19% chance to kill an elite model. Now, since it's lost the Relentless ability, just a 41% chance to kill Horde, 23% chance to kill mid-range, and 3.5 against elites. So the damage forecasted, we'll go through that. It was against Horde, it was 9.8, now it's 5.4. Mid-range, 8.9, now 4.6. And elite, it's gone from 8.07 to 3.97.
That is a huge nerf. That is a huge nerf. I mean, this guy has gone from being a sort of reliable damage dealer on your team to being completely unreliable, very swingy. But you have to take him anyway. But like he's not going to do a lot, and he's also tied with the heavy keyword. So this is you're going to feel this every time you shoot him because a sort of a 37 or 38% drop in effectiveness versus Horde and a 39% drop in effectiveness versus mid range and 16% effectiveness drop in against elite. Oh man, that's gross. To the point in which you're never forecasting to ever kill an elite model with this. Whereas when you have relentless, you actually were like, not worth forecasting,
One in 5 times
yeah.
it might have happened. That's ridiculous.
So if you shot him 4 times, you'd expect that at least one point during the game you might get a kill.
I can't believe how oppressive he was. I knew he was good, but when you actually look at the data there, it's like, wow, it's a reliable model.
And this is the tactical tip we talked about in the past, right? Like, dice don't kill people, dice with rerolls do, and that was this weapon's main strength for those rerolls it had. But actually now, nah, he's going to be a lot more swingy. And this feels to me a bit unnecessary to go this far. I think they could have maybe just dropped it down to ceaseless, or to be honest, I'd have quite like ceaseless and balanced. So you had like almost a halfway house where you'd be able to reroll 1 and 1s. But no, this feels like it's going to be really rough. I think it's going to particularly hurt into those elite matchups, because this is where you could dump a lot of damage into a single model. And they were already struggling with that matchup, which is why they gave them the buff to the Architect Beam in the first place, right? So, this is going to hurt, and there's a few other things that I think are going to make this worse for them as well. What's the other nerf they received, Conor?
Well, just while you mentioned Caesars, I was thinking about it then, because the Recon Drone's Burst Cannon, similar sort of toy, that's got Caesars, and that doesn't feel oppressive. It feels like a good gun, but it doesn't feel oppressive. So,
yeah, absolutely.
I think Caesars would be fair. We'll see it. We'll see what happens, I guess, but might be onto something there. Yeah, so they had another nerf to Undaunted Explorers, and I think this is similar to what we've seen to other durability nerfs in the Dataslate. So Strategic Ploy, the first time each friendly Elucidian Star Strider operative fights in combat or a shooting attack is made against it, instead of each time, damage halved to a minimum of 2. So that's 2 changes. It's not every single time now, and also it's got a ceiling now of 2 damage being reduced.
Yeah, absolutely. Which is, again, this is the nerf that I was sort of saying I think the team sort of needs, and this makes the team feel a bit more better to play against, because it was a bit weird when you had these insanely durable humans effectively just hanging around on objectives, and not dying because they were just really keen to be there and explore the objective. So this is a good nerf, but I think the interesting thing again, and this is why I think in session are maybe going to swing forwards a little bit, is because if you can double tap these models, so if you can shoot them twice, you have to remember it's only ever going to affect them the first time that they get a hit. So let's say you hit them on the first attack with a crit and a hit and whatever else, and they halve the damage from that crit, and they take the other one, then they're 5 wounds remaining. When they can hit them again, and actually that might be enough to force through, irrespective of what you get, because the crit's going to get through the damage. So that's a really nice change where the double tap might force through enough, because you can't do it every time. And also, and this doesn't maybe need an FAQ, but it says like the first time an operative fights in combat. I'm wondering if that means if I hit you with a normal hit first, you halve the damage of that, but then I can hit you with a crit subsequently. And then you wouldn't be able to halve that damage. So in that instance, like power swords and that sort of stuff, where you might be able to halve their first attack to say 3, and then do the next one, or even let's say a chainsaw where it'd be 5, you'd be halving that to 3 or whatever. Now you wouldn't be able to do that, and that could be really interesting for the way that the team plays. Is potentially you could hit them with a slightly lighter attack first, and then hit them with the crit subsequently to be able to force you the damage that you needed to kill them. So I'll be interested to see how that one plays out going forwards, because that might be a really big change for the team as well. But it feels like this has been dialed back a little bit on what it had. So overall, this feels like some pretty sizable nerfs to the team, which will definitely hurt their win rate, I think. But they've still got a good toolbox. But I think particularly in those elite matchups where they're already hurting you a little bit, stuff like that rotor cannon nerf, they're going to feel a lot.
Yeah, I think they needed something. We've been looking at them. We were even struggling ourselves. How do you go about nerfing this team? Because they're a brilliant, fun side to play, but maybe they're a bit too oppressive. So, I mean, they've still got that 3+ Architect Beam to try and shoot one model. But yeah, the rotor cannon, just my gut tells me it probably does want ceaseless. But we'll have to see.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so another team that got quite a few nerfs were Breachers. Again, quite a solid side, so no surprise there for them. So, first of all, to the Blitz tactical ploy, add the following sentence: if you if you do either, you cannot re-roll the remaining attack dice. You play breaches quite a lot, Ryan. What is that actually telling us?
Yeah, so obviously blitz basically means you get to retain if your first activation, your first shoot activation on your turn, you get to retain a crit and you get to retain a hit. And what they're saying now is if you do that, the other dice that you're rolling, you can't re-roll. So if you have the attack order up, which gives you effectively called ambush, you can't now re-roll them, or you can't CP re-roll it or anything like that. This is fine. Like it is what it is. I don't think this addresses why Blitz was good though. I think the reason Blitz is really good is because you have the close assault and Blitz combined, which guarantees you 3 hits. Because close assault is if you get 2 hits, you can retain a miss as a hit. So you would be guaranteeing 2 hits by using the Blitz ploy, and then you would be guaranteeing that 3rd hit, irrespective of what you roll. So you'd roll 2 dice looking for a 3 up or a 4 up. If you get one of them, you'd be hitting all your attacks. I think interestingly, Blitz is one of these ploys that the team actually really needs versus the elite meta. They don't have that many big high damage threats that are really good into elites. They have the metal gun, they have the plasma gun, and I guess they have like the power weapons. But if those models start dying and they don't trade out and they don't kill models, the rest of your guys aren't particularly killy. So it'll be really interesting to see how they do and if they run out of threats. That being said, one of the teams that I thought they really struggled into, which was Nurgle Legionaries. I think that they're better now because their shotguns are going to be doing 3-3 rather than 2-3 like previous. So maybe that matchup's got a little bit better. But
I actually can't think of a scenario where you re-rolled that extra dice in Blitz. You've just never needed it. It's normally been like a melter gun or super bomb that's just killed me straight off the bat anyway, guaranteed. So.
Yeah, exactly. So you're normally getting within 3 inches. I'd be rolling 2 dice looking for 4 up, which is statistically going to happen, right? So you then get 1-4, and then the miss that you didn't hit, you convert to a hit anyway, which is 4 hits, and it's doing its job. I guess it means that if you somehow miss both of those, then you're only getting 2 hits through. But that was always a possibility anyway. I guess if you roll really poorly.
Still very reliable. But the Navis Grenadier, he also got a subtle nerf. So just delete the final sentence of the Grenadier. And I haven't read his stats, but I'm pretty sure that's just bringing him in line with like the other Grenadiers and stopping him having 2 of each bomb. Is that right?
That's exactly it. Yeah. So, and again, I don't really think this was too much of a nerf. Like, even if you got so he only ever had 1 demo charge, as far as I was aware. That's how I was playing it. Maybe I was nerfing myself, but he only ever had one demo charge, but he had 2 frags and 2 cracks. That was the idea. But I never really saw anyone using those anyway, because even if you did like a last and first action with him, so at the end of say turning point 2, you activated him, he threw his demo charge. At the beginning of turning point 3, you activated him and he threw his crack. Like, I've never seen that model live through that turn. So I've never seen him throw a second crack grenade onto his demo. So fine, it aligns him to the other Grenadiers, but I don't think it's going to be a huge game changer in the team's gameplay.
And then the last one, again, talking about alignment, just aligns their damage reduction with everyone else's nerfs. So brace for counter attacks, tree deploy now is to a minimum of 3 instead of to 2, which probably is the most significant nerf to the team, I would imagine.
Yeah, this is the one that's going to hit him right in the feels. Because bolters and shotguns love this, right? So 3 regular hits now kills, irrespective if you have a stim or not. So actually the usefulness of that stim is somewhat gone away, because it used to be really useful, because you'd be hitting them with, let's say you get 2 hits through, they'll take 4 damage and they wouldn't be wounded. Well, now they are going to be wounded. Or if you got 3 hits through, they'd be wounded, but they wouldn't be dead. Whereas now they're going to die. So yeah, really interesting how that's going to change their damage breakpoint. Note that it doesn't affect their crits though, so I think now arguably, the fact that they're going to be 3 damage anyway versus the crits and bolt guns, it's a somewhat nil change. But I think what's going to be interesting here is the teams that people maybe aren't expecting to benefit like from these changes, which is things like Wormblade with their 3-3 shotguns, things like Kroot with their 3-4 weapons. These sorts of teams are actually going to really benefit from these changes, where these matchups have now got significantly easier for them. So it's interesting to see that this has been quite a blanket change across the board for these teams, and those 3-4 weapons are now looking a lot more spicy than they were before.
So we've spoken a lot about the nerf. Should we talk about some buffs?
Yeah, let's do it.
High Tech Circle. They've been buffed, which everyone will be very glad to hear about. So let's jump in first with the reanimation protocols. So, resolve before living metal ability, operatives regain D3 plus 3 lost wounds and can instead be placed within that reanimation token, but not within engagement range of enemy operatives with an order of your choice. So this just means that when they turn up, they then get bonus wounds. And I think beforehand was the timing slightly off.
Yeah, so the first change was that they would be able to do the living metal ability as well, but now they're getting more wounds, they're getting the living metal, they get to appear within 3 of their token, and they get to appear with an order of their choice, which is quite a lot of big changes. So let's start from the beginning. The first change, the fact they get more wounds, means that you're never going to bring an operative back that's wounded. Now that is huge. And for the internal balance of the faction, I think we need to start going back and we need to start looking at who we're valuing, like Technomancer. Well, probably not anymore. I mean, to be fair, I don't think he was the case anyway, but I think that Chronomancer is going to be looking really good coming out of this balanced data slate and someone for us to focus on. Being able to appear within 3 is quite nice. That people might remember playing or know of playing big 40k with the reanimation of Necrons where they'd slowly creep forwards and they would get a bit closer to you, bit closer to you, bit closer to you. Well, that's exactly what they're going to be doing now as well. So they might be able to die just off of an objective, but then suddenly reappear on that objective in conceal or on engage, ready to shoot, or whatever it's going to be, and be able to hurt you that way. So the fact that they can now regenerate from when they were previously on engage, but now be on to conceal, can be really good for their survivability. So they're not going to get shot off the board again straight away. So that's pretty good. And harking back to that minimum damage 3, that Chronomancer with the Aeon Stave, which was a 3/3 damage weapon, oof, that's looking pretty spicy right now. So that's a pretty significant buff to their durability on the table. And I think probably a good internal faction balance. So the Technomancer's less favourable, Chronomancer's looking real good, looking good at the moment. What's their other changes, Connor?
Yeah, so the Plasma Sight Accelerator, he's had a buff too. So his Accelerate action is now 0 AP and within 6, and beforehand it was 3.
Yeah, this is huge, right? Because this is right where the team needs it, which is action efficiency. They didn't have enough APL on the board. This was a way of them getting some APL, and this is now a free APL. So this guy's a little battery, and he's going to be able to go do the mission actions that you want him to be doing, and at the same time as doing them, be buffing the team in the right way. And the fact that he can do it to 6 inches now is also really good. So it's going to make him more flexible. It's going to let him play that mission a bit better, and it's going to give the team APL, which is what the team needs. So it's a really nice buff, a really helpful buff, and I think all High-Tech Circle players are going to feel this straight away.
The other Plasma Sight, he's also been buffed. So the Plasma Sight reanimation ability. Now you do not subtract 1 when from your APL when doing this ability.
Yeah, this is once again, this is me thinking that the Technomancer maybe isn't the one to look for anymore. So this guy is going to keep the guys going forwards by doing those reanimates where you need them. And now he's also going to be able to do the mission. So he might be able to move to an objective, loot it, and having reanimated someone last turn, that sort of stuff. So again, just really helping with that action efficiency and allowing him to go and play the missions in the way that you want him to, which is good because once again the team need that efficiency based on how many models they have.
We're not done. So the Cryptech, Despotech, and the Apprentech, they will get 2 more wounds and improve their ballistic skill, weapon skill characteristics of their weapons by 1. Pretty significant boost that.
Huge. The Despotech just got so deadly. So combined with the fact, and we'll talk about it in a second, but he's able to get balanced. He's hitting on 2s. He's now a reliable killing machine, and he is a fantastic candidate for that Chronomancer. Like buff to move, invulnerable save, feel no pain. You stack all those bits on him, and you're going to yeet him into those enemy models. Hitting on 2s, 12 wounds. Oh, he's going to be an absolute beast. He's going to get some killing done, and he's going to be a really hard model to shift, which is awesome stuff to see. The Prentech, I'm on the fence, right? Like he's a bit better now, but I'm not sold overall. He's not killy enough against the stuff that I actually think he needs to be killy against. Now, I would argue there is maybe a place if you're playing against like Nurgles, you don't care about 4 damage because it's going to go down to 3 or breaches, whatever. Fine, this is a good guy to take. But against everyone else, I don't know. I'm not sold on him. Those Cult Ambush rerolls are quite nice, but I think really an immortal is probably going to serve you better in most instances. Maybe I'm wrong on that one. I haven't played too much of the team, but my gut says you want to be going on those 5 immortals and your Cryptek. And this guy's probably going to be on the bench, even though now he is a bit more durable, he's more mobile, and he's a bit more killy. So fair enough. And then finally, the Cryptek, having that weapon skill increase, it's nice. Don't throw him in melee anyway. Please don't throw him in melee. He's only got 3 attacks. He's not killing anyone unless they're one hit. Even then, it's a bit swingy. He's not a melee model. He's not a melee model. Please don't do it. He's just there to shoot people and buff other people. I know Korn's whispering in your ear saying, "Throw him in melee, throw him in melee." But just don't do it. Yeah, please don't do it. Yeah, Desprotec, he is now epic. He is going to be a monster, and people should be scared of him for that.
And both the Cryptek's command action and the Desprotec's demand action are now 0 AP, so even further buffs for them.
Absolutely, and this is once again, it's hitting them when they need it, right? APL efficiency. This is what this team is getting. So he can now be telling his buddy to overwatch. He can be doing mission actions, pickup actions. The Desprotect can make the guns more reliable, and he can turn himself into like a sniper. He can turn someone else into a sniper, or he can push forward and be a more effective in melee as well. So the ways you can stack on this guy are so good. You can make him so he's lethal 5 in melee, now hitting on 2s with a reroll. If someone charges him, they take mortal wounds, etc., etc. Like, you can put some real fear into people with this sort of model and his ability to do stuff, which is really nice, and it's great for action efficiency. But this isn't actually their best buff. The best buff is still to come.
Yeah, there's this last buff. It's like a nice management buff. So Cryptek actions change all instances of the end of the turning point and the start of the next turning point to the start of this operative's next activation if it's incapacitated, or if another friendly operative performs this action, whichever comes first.
Oh my god, this is massive, right? So, this is the thing that you can hang your whole team around, right? So the Cryptek actions are the workhorse of this team, and this is where it's going to get it done, right? And it's going to last, and that's the main thing. So now you're giving that your Desprotect that 3-up invulnerable. You're giving him a feel no pain. You're making him more mobile. You're activating him at the end of turning point 1. But at turning point 2, he's still just as durable. He's still just as mobile. He's still just as killy, and he's doing it all again, right? So this is so good. And then not just that, but you can then give that to someone else on turning point 2 after that guy's already benefited from it. So when he dies, you can give it to someone else, and he's going to hang around until turning point 3. So this is massively increasing the efficiency of these Cryptek actions. It's going to be really significant, and it's going to make your team play so much better going forward. So this is huge. The buffs in general, as a collective, are really significant, increasing the killing power, the action efficiency, the staying power of the team. Is it going to be enough? I'm not sure. I need to get on the table and play with them. Stand by, for Saturday. I'm going to hopefully go and do that. But this is getting me excited about Necrons. I think there's now some stuff there that can actually be played with in a meaningful way. Combine that with their quite good faction tac ops and their recon deck, and I think this team might be playable. So I'm excited to see them on the table. I'm excited to see how they play. We'll have to wait and see.
I think it's just nice to feel like you're not obligated to use the Cryptek as the first or second model going into the next turning point, because it can be the last model. That's still going to be, unless he gets incapacitated, admittedly, but that ability is still going to be ongoing.
Yeah, and he's already quite durable, and it also it's just so good. It means that you have so much more flexibility in how you're playing, because you're absolutely right. Before you're always wondering when you're going to use him. Like, you have to try and use your Cryptek early, but he's your main killing model. Whereas now it's going to give you that flexibility. You can soup someone up on turn 1. You can, for instance, if you're using the Psychomancer, you could nerf one of their models until they've activated it. They've activated it, and then they're injured, and then they're going to nerf another one of their models before they activate it. So now you've made 2 of their models really ineffective during a turn, all that sort of stuff. So it really helps with their efficiency, which is really good to see. I think that they're going to get a lot out of this balanced data slate.
But there were some other winners, weren't there? Kazakin got some buffs too.
Absolutely, yeah.
So all operatives got an additional wound, which is nice. In addition, with the elite ability, in each strategy phase, add 2 elite points to your pool. I think, was it previously just the 1 they were getting every turn? So bonus elite point.
So what they had before is just their leader got elite points, whereas now
I see. Yeah.
they're getting effectively double each turn.
So okay, so can we clarify that because I've obviously misunderstood that. So is the leader still generating points, or is it the leader's now generating 2 points?
So the leader's generating 2, and the team is generating 2.
Yeah. Okay. That's pretty cool for them. Fair play. Also, they get access to some new equipment. It's called a combat blade. I don't know. I have no idea what the profile of that is. What is it? Is it a 3?
So the combat blade is it's 3 attacks on 4s, 3/4 damage. So it's a slightly more effective melee weapon. But the really cool thing about that is it still works from the Forcadia tactical ploy. Now I think people are potentially looking at this the wrong way. I saw people say, "Oh, this is great because it means that I can spend elite points and I can kill a 4 wound model guy with a single hit." Sure, actually what this lets you do is it lets you kill a 5 wound model guy, right? Because you're going to yeet this guy in, right? And if you need to, you're going to make it a crit, right? So you could always do that before, but now you can do a 5 damage crit guaranteed and kill someone. So if you see a guy hang around 5 wounds remaining, you're going to go, I'm not going to even bother rolling. Well, you roll a dice and you see what you get. Roll 3 dice and you spend however many elite points you need to make one of them a crit and punch him in to kill him straight away, which is a nice little change.
Can we compare it? Do we know what the fists were doing beforehand? Because it's only one.
So
I didn't specify that actually. This is one equipment point, which is cheap, but it's nice to have.
In fact, let me just go and just double check all of this data before I go and tell something horribly wrong. So I'm pretty sure previously the fists were 2/3 and Forcadia put you up to 3/4, and this is now 3/4, and the Forcadia is going to put you up to 4/5.
And the 3 damage is now good against a lot of teams because that durable has been reduced across the board, and 3 damage is significant.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and that's kind of the point, right? Is that now this team generally is going to perform better against any of those teams with that damage reduction because they're all of their weapons are pretty much 3/4. Their hotshot las guns and that sort of stuff. But the point that I would say about this is that the main teams with that were your elite teams, and they were already doing pretty well against them. So yeah, I don't know. I'm not out of all the teams. I don't think Kazakin are the best. I think they're in a better place, right? They're in a much better place, but I don't think they're the best. But I'll just quickly run through the Comet Blade. So it's 1 EP, it's 3 attacks, it hits on 4, it's 3/4, and it does benefit from the full KD tactical ploy. So that's going to give you a feel no pain, and it's also going to give you a bonus to damage. So you got to 4/5. So yeah, you can go in and make sure that you reliably kill a model where you need to in melee, which is pretty nice to be able to remove that RNG that would potentially previously exist on that melee roll, which is good.
How does Forcadia work? Does it work defensively?
No, it's only when a model is activated.
Okay. Yeah.
So it's going to be when you're going into the offensive rather than say just someone charges you and you quickly trying to like pull a sneaky and get it to work. So that's kind of how it's going forwards.
But that is cheeky though, being able to use elites now to guarantee a crit, because even things like Harlequins, where they could, I think it's a jest where they force you to do a parry. Well, I'm going to elite points, and this is a guaranteed crit.
And that's kind of it. So it's that make sure when you're doing it, you focus on killing the 5 wound model sort of thing or less. So that's the main point. So it's using that crit in a in a very effective way, and it also gives you a 5 up full no pain, which is nice because you're going to be sat in the open. But I wouldn't be trying to use it just to punch people multiple times, because you've only got 3 attacks, and going in with 4s, you're probably going to get 2 hits. Now you could, I guess, make one of them into your failed hit into a crit maybe, and then you're guaranteed to do some damage. But yeah, I wouldn't. I would try to use this as a one hit against 5 wound models or less. Okay, cool. And the other main benefit that they got is actually the adding 1 to the wound characteristic. And this is probably the biggest buff, right? Because this actually is going to affect their durability where the team was particularly weak before. So them going up to 8 wounds, that's going to change the balance or change the damage threshold for them dying and for them being wounded, right? So now if they take 4 damage. Yeah, their breakpoint is significantly better. So they're not getting wounded or 4 damage anymore. And they're going to hang around a bit longer, which is nice. So they're less vulnerable to that bolt of fire, which is good because they were going to get slayed by Intercession. That being said, you still need to be careful against those lethal 5 P1 bolters because I think they might shred you. But yeah, it's going to help. So more elite points, a bit more durable, and an extra melee option is cool. I'm yet to get these guys on the table and have a good old play with them. I think the fact that they're going to have quite a lot of elite points means that they're going to be using those crits more effectively, and I think that's probably the way to do it. Is look at making those misses that you get and making a miss into a crit almost every time to force through a lot of damage as and when you can. And that's kind of where we're at with the team.
Yeah, I think that was a nice data slip. I said it earlier, so again, I do like the subtle, not heavy-handed approach to these tweaks. They're just little gradual tweaks that we've had here and there to address the game, and we'll see the impact of that and then do another one if necessary. I like it, and I like these changes.
Yeah, it'd be really interesting to see how these affect the game, because there's quite a lot of changes. So for Hyrotech, it's huge changes, right? They've changed a lot on that team. The primary VP change, I don't think anyone was expecting. I mean, it's still odd that loot isn't up to 4 VP per objective yet. I think that might be something that should probably come in. But for the rest of them, that they seem to be fairly okay. I don't necessarily think that they're all needed to the extent that they're at there. But fine. Like we'll time will tell. Maybe we'll see a new meta surge forwards. But hopefully that was of use. So we tried to do a little bit of context there, give a little bit of stats, give a little bit of background, a little bit of assessment into the balanced data slate, rather than just give you, instead of just reading what's on a page, because I'm sure most people can read. So hopefully that's been of use. If people are enjoying this, Connor, and they're thinking to themselves, that was really helpful. I really love what you guys are doing, and they would like to support us a little bit. Is there a way that they could go about doing that?
Yeah, so the first thing you can do is physically like this video and hit subscribe as well. Click that bell icon so you don't miss out on any future videos too. It helps us. We're trying to get to 1,000 subscribers, so that's the point where we can start to get monetized by YouTube, and we're already grown to, I think we're over 500 now, which is phenomenal. Thanks everyone.
We are halfway there. Yeah, we are over halfway, which is awesome.
So yeah, please do that and share it with people. If you want to give immediate support to us, you can join our Patreon, where for as little as £3 a month, which would get us a new paintbrush. Well, I say us a new paintbrush. It'll get me a new paintbrush because Ryan doesn't do painting. But it will get you early access to all of our content, as well as some exclusive Patreon-only content and inclusion in our questionnaires. And then finally, we've got an affiliate link down below to Element Games. If you're going to buy any Warhammer or Killteam or any hobby stuff, if you buy it through that link, then we get support from them too.
Awesome stuff. That's great. Unfortunately, we have overrun a lot, and we do have quite a few Patreon priority questions. Instead, I think what we'll just answer the first one, because we always want to make sure we pay back to the patrons. So we'll answer the first one. We'll take the next few into the next week, because we can answer them then, and we'll save the tactical tip as well. But I'll put a tactical tip on the Patreon for those guys, because they've earned it. And we'll answer just the first Patreon priority question. If we want to go for that,
but we'll jump into them next week. Yeah, we don't want to lose these. It's a good question.
We'll do the rest of them 2, 3, and 4 next week, because we've already written the answers to them, so there's no reason not to.
Phenomenal. Yeah. So this question ties into the change in the critical ops packs that we mentioned right at the start. Does the uplift to 16 primary VP favour hordes or elites?
So I think it's a really good question, right? Because it's focusing on that win condition, which I think is really important. Initially, most people's gut feel is they're going to say it's going to favour hordes because they're going to be able to sit on more objectives earlier on. However, I think if you play elites in the mindset of, I think, and this is what elites should be really good at doing, is denying VP heavily. This is where it's going to really help you out. So. I think it doesn't actually favour either team. It's just going to make you adapt your game plan. So the new missions themselves are pretty balanced, right? And I think, if anything, arguably, the new missions somewhat favour elites, because the ability to get onto 4 points turn 1 is, it requires effectively 3 APL. Like to get 4 points, you either need some sort of comms buff, or you need some GA2 with a pre-game dash, or you need some way of like a pseudo 3 APL to be able to get to the positions you need to get to. Elites have that just baked in, right? And they can sit on those objectives, and they're hard to take away from them. So I think actually this is pretty well balanced. 6 objectives is pretty well balanced. I think aggressive elite player who throws away their models early will be hurt by this. But a slightly more cautious, that commits just the right amount of resources throughout the game, doesn't overcommit, is going to find this to be a really useful change for them, because they can get on those primary objectives early, get that early lead, and potentially maintain it just enough throughout the course of the game, which would be really good. So my answer is neither. It's just going to require you to adapt your game plan. The new missions are pretty balanced, and if anything, I think it slightly favours elites in general. But maybe I'm going to be proved heavily wrong on that. We'll have to see what happens with the win rates. Cool. Any thoughts on that, Connor?
This is my gut reaction, and feel free to add your own thoughts as I think it out. But we'll park loot to one side for the minute. And apologies, I've forgotten the name of the. I know they're secure and whatnot, but I've forgotten which one. So there's 2 other missions. One where you have to sit on the objective and tap it, and one where you sit on it, control it, and you can move forward. Which way around are they?
So one is secure. You have to go to the objective. You then spend an AP to capture it. Once you've done that, it remains yours. It's sticky.
Yeah.
And you can leave. But each time someone goes back onto it, they have to spend an AP to recapture it if your opponent wants to take it from you. Whereas capture is just determined at the end of the turn. Whoever has more APL on it at the end of the turn takes ownership of that objective.
My gut is telling me, just thinking about it, elites are going to struggle on that one, but with secure, where it's sticky and they can capture their.
Capture sticky as well. So if you sit on it as capture and then you move forwards,
okay,
it remains
sticky?
yours.
Which
is why I think it favours elites in general, because those sticky objectives really help them. It's only loot which isn't, and actually you can move up early with elites and get those points.
But loot hasn't changed, though, has it? Because it's still only an 18 point. See, I think who was getting 12 on loot? I think really we were getting 9 and 10, something like that. If it's going well, you get
8 and 10 or 9 and 9. Yeah,
we were never getting above 12, or the thought of getting above 12 is ridiculous.
Absolutely, yeah.
So I think you're right. I think elites are gonna shine here.
I think so, and particularly if you start using things like Seek and Destroy to heavily start denying your opponent VP by removing their models and score yourself VP, I think there's some good efficiency stacked into that. To be able to hurt horde teams quite effectively, and as well, like a lot of the big horde teams at the moment, like Vetguard, security's not so good on tac ops, so actually it's quite easy to deny those tac ops. So there's definitely something there, and I would just my parting comment would be, tac ops are still going to be really important. It's still going to win you the game. This change in primary is just going to affect your ability to regain should your tac ops go horribly wrong. So if you've lost a 2VP on tac ops, you then go, oh, okay, I need to play much more aggressive on the primary. It's kind of how I think it goes.
I think it'll be interesting to see what you say next week after you've been to this tournament and you've won every game with 20 points, but still lost because you didn't get enough primary points.
Yeah, maybe. We'll have to see. Well, it's all about the win condition, isn't it? So make sure you check where the win condition is at the tournament you're going to. And if it is primary VP, then make sure you flex into that. Obviously, scoring those extra primary VPs might be more important. But I think most tournaments are using tac ops as their primary tiebreaker at the moment. Sweet. So that's going to bring us to the end of this episode. Hopefully you found something new or useful while listening. If you did, throwing us a like, as we said, would be greatly appreciated. And if you want to make sure you don't miss any episodes, make sure to hit that subscribe button so you get notifications as soon as the next one drops. That really helps a small channel like ours, and we're already halfway there. We're at 500 subscribers, which is absolutely amazing. Hopefully we can keep driving that all the way up to the 1,000 mark that we really want to hit. As always, we'd love to hear your thoughts and feedback. So if you do have any comments, make sure you hit that comment drop one of those comments below, and we'll get right to you. Thank you so much for listening, as always. I'm your host, Ryan. This has been Turning Point Tactics, and we'll see you next week.
See you next week.